Hello and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the Monster Hunter rerun. There are 39 units in the REM and it costs 10 magic stones per roll. This rerun brings a few new units and almost all of the 7 and 8 rarity units are exchangeable. The most notable new unit is Namielle, which unfortunately requires 4 copies to create a farming system. There are also a few buff units that synergize well and can almost effortlessly farm some in-game dungeons. One interesting thing to note is that all of the 5 stars have been removed from the REM and there is no way to obtain them in NA. These units were buffed and JP had a way to get a copy of each for free, but since we don't have an NA version of Pad Battle, we simply have no way of obtaining them. Not that these are good, but Gunho should have at least given us a copy of each via mail or something else to that effect. Anyway, I do think you might want to skip the REM even if you care for the units that enable in-game dungeon farming, since you could mostly exchange for all of those needed units and can also buy them via bundle. If you don't have much to exchange away, I still don't see much upside in rolling this REM for fodder, since the chance of getting something of value is very low. And at 10 magic stones per roll, this machine is pretty expensive. Each multi-monster hunter gets you 5 pulls for Felynes, which are also mostly useless, but I think that's at least one incentive to do one multi-pull and see if you get lucky in either machine. But I would only do that if you're willing to walk away with pretty much nothing of use after spending 50 stones. I'm not going to look into most of the units, even all of the new 6 stars, since there are so many and they don't have a lot going on. Some of those new units do have decent equips with a power break or multiple team HP awakenings, but if you have a deep box, you probably have much better options. There is some novelty to all of the new Monster Hunter power break equips, but I don't place much importance on this yet, except for a few that I will mention later. First, I'll talk about the free units, the farmable and the exchangeable ones. Magna Mallow and Stygian Ogre are descended boss drops, but there's not much use for them. As units, they are very underwhelming, and also, there's no transforming Monster Hunter unit who would need either of them for a sync awakening. Maybe just keep them unskilled in your monster box in case they're ever useful. As an example, I have used Magmalow's high cooldown equip in a Leading Tamara farming team where I just want to change Nefty's sub-attribute but not overcharge her. Silver Rathalos and Gold Rathian is the free knockoff version of the badge unit, which as a base is not that good to begin with, so this version with weaker awakenings probably won't be useful at all. But free is free, so just clear the Monster Hunter novice dungeons to get a copy of this free unit. The hunters have a lot of evos and require some farming for the evo materials, but at the moment I don't think the male or female hunter evos are all that good. Their main use will be as exchange fodder for Zeus, Athena, or CL. Zeus is the best unit out of these 3, especially if you care about farming. As an example, if you want to quickly farm the upcoming new descended boss, Abyssal Seeker, the Zeus Hunter will be a key sub to quickly farm that descended boss and its breakable parts. Some Monster Hunter Colosseum teams sometimes use CL, so she would be my second priority. And last is Athena, who I actually haven't seen being used, so you could probably skip farming fodder for this exchange. You might as well farm them if you have the monster points to spare, but again, definitely prioritize Zeus as he is useful for other dungeons since he is one of the few units with the gravity active skill that has an attribute absorption void effect. There are 2 exchangeable equips that you can get a copy of by farming these 2 Monster Hunter dungeons. Both are definitely worth the farm as these are pretty solid equips with the new Power Break Awakening. Here's a brief overview about this new mechanic. To even get a chance of getting the monster parts to drop, you have to aim and kill the parts before or at the same time as you go for the kill on the enemy on that floor, because the floor is completed once the main body is dead. Some teams might not be able to one-shot the whole floor since usually the breakable parts have a lot more HP than the enemy itself. As an example, in SN4, the breakable parts have double the boss's HP. This seems to be the general trend for all of these breakable parts. So you're going to want to either target the parts, use gravities, or ensure you can kill both the parts and the main body at the same time. It is possible for the parts to drop without any power break awakening, but the base drop rate is pretty low, so you do want to put as many power break awakenings in your team as possible, as each one increases the drop rate by 10%. Both black metal equips have multi-turn healing active skills, so they could have very niche uses. Their awakenings are not too bad, so if you have enough medals, I'd get them just in case if you don't have a copy already. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't lose sleep over missing these equips. For each multi-pull that you do in Monster Hunter, you'll get a multi in the mail for these feline units. All of them are basically power break equips, but only a few of them stand out. If you do decide to roll in Monster Hunter, make sure to do multis, and even though a lot of them look useless, I would keep every feline just in case. Here are some that stand apart from the rest. Tigrex and Gore have equips with a skill boost, TPA, and a power break awakening, and they also have a low cooldown shield breaker active skill, so these could come in useful if you overcharge them, but these situations are probably too niche. Their final evo could all deal some decent damage, so they're not that bad if you need a unit with this type of active skill and have no better options. Blue Odin is an equip with 3 skill boosts and a power break awakening, and all of these awakenings are useful on their own, so just based on that, this is not a bad equip even though their active skill doesn't really do anything. The Kurotobi and Rathian versions are exchangeable felines and might be worthwhile if you like their playstyle, either as leaders or as subs. Both can deal a great amount of damage, but their lack of third attribute is a bit disappointing. That mainly goes for the Kurocat, since at least Rathian has a higher damage output. I have seen Rathian used in Geno teams as a looping time and roulette unit, and maybe Kurocat will see some use in future Butler Kurotobi teams. I am very skeptical of that, but that's a possibility. Unfortunately, each exchange requires 10, 6 stars or higher Monster Hunter units, which is very expensive, because I think it's much better to use those 10 units to get 2 copies of Namielle, Fatalis, and or Nergigante. Okay, now onto the units that you can get from the REM. Again, most of these have some decent equips. There are a bunch of them that have the new Power Break Awakening, or have 3DM HPs plus some other flair. I'll try to focus on the units that I've seen being used, but do let me know if you think I overlooked someone. Legiana and Balfalk both have 2 interesting equips, one with double resist and one with a Power Break and Damage Awakening. Those second equips might be useful in TPA and Rainbow based teams respectively. Safi and Diablos are pretty underwhelming as base units right now, but they have interesting equips and are exchangeable. Out of these 2, I prefer Diablos since his 7C Power Break equip is less conditional than Safi's Dragon Killer equip, but these 2 units and most of the other exchangeable 7 stars don't have that much value in my eyes, so I would take a first look at the 7 stars that I'll be talking about later in the video. Brachydios has the highest mass attack button active skill in NA, as we unfortunately don't have access to Cyclops or whatever his Gung Ho Another Story variant would be. It's not a bad button if you don't have any of the other better buttons that have no extra animations like Urokodaki or Kamen Rider Tajadol. Of course, these active skills pale in comparison to the newer billion damage active skills that have come out as of late, but these weaker buttons are good enough to power through some novice dungeons. Kirin is great for farming dungeons like Al Shura 1 or the Monster Hunter dungeons. Running asymmetrical pairing ensures 12 combos by only matching 1 row and having no Skyfall combos, all thanks to Kirin's active skill and leader skill. If you're exchanging Monster Hunter fodder, I would definitely try to keep at least 1 copy of each of these units, and in the case of Kirin, preferably 2 copies, as to not rely on a friend to have 1 up as a helper. Both Lygia Cruz and Seregios could work as either a cleric or looping shield, respectively, but their main appeal is their double TPA and Power Break equips. These, especially Seregios, are somewhat commonly used in Omnimon SN4 power farming teams. We don't really know if we'll get Digimon, but again, try to keep at least 1 copy, especially if you have any hopes that Digimon will come to NA. Orishi Kirin is a water origin damage stick that could work as a Rimuru replacement. That is, if you at least have 1 Rimuru to begin with. Their second column change active skill complements Rimuru and Baldora's active skill, but honestly, you might have enough orb generation after using Rimuru's active skill. So in some cases, Orishi Kirin might be overkill if you have other orb generators in the team. Unfortunately, Rimuru has fallen off in popularity, and their teams were pretty expensive to begin with. Therefore, a lot of people might not care much about this unit. Even in the near future, it seems water teams won't be getting much support. JP just teased Stitch, and he's a 5 or more water orbs match leader, so maybe this Kirin could work in a Stitch team, especially because Kirin's active skill is a little more reliable than Stitch's to ensure enough orbs on the board to match PDPs, crosses, or other orb-hungry shapes. though Kirin is not devil type. That can be easily solved with an equip. Speaking of Disney rerun, Pooh and Genie teams need balance type units, so Kirin's equip could rise in value since this equip is one of the bulkier options out there. Unfortunately, NA might not see this collab at all, since we never got the original run, but it seems Gongo is involved with a new Disney mobile game that also has an English version, and is the reason why JP is having a rerun. So maybe this is a good sign? Who knows? It probably doesn't matter. Gore Magala is a damage-oriented cleric with a low cooldown active skill that is sometimes used in some dark Monster Hunter farming teams. They do need a limited equip to actually deal decent damage though. A few other clerics might be able to deal more damage in dark teams, but since those dark Monster Hunter farming teams usually run 2 copies of Fatalis and have 2 other Monster Hunter units as leaders, if you include this unit as the cleric, that brings the total Monster Hunter unit count to at least 5 in the team. So at that point, you gain more from running the Monster Hunter badge rather than the usual 15% team HP badge. Gore's new light TPA Evo doesn't have any place to call home though, and they alone don't bring light TPA teams into the limelight as their active skill and leader skill are a bit underwhelming. Yes, 5 effective HP is on the higher end of the spectrum, so you can definitely clear some of the new dungeons with this unit, but I think you will struggle to find enough support for your team. Light TPAs are also getting the new Monster Hunter BGM unit, but that other team doesn't really need Gore as their leader skills are not compatible and the BGM unit already takes care of regeneration. I guess you could say that this is more accurately a light and dark TPA unit, but that doesn't change the fact that that playstyle too doesn't have much support. This Evo's active skill is one of the first single target gravities, so it's a bit unique in that sense. We'll be seeing more of these active skills later on when we hopefully get the JJK collab. Brute Tigrex is yet another wood orb generator, but this one is slightly better than the others. This 2-unit system loops their attack and cap breaking buff, so Tigrex is much better than someone like P2, not only for the fact that those effects loop, but also due to hitting their damage caps more consistently. This unit will soon have some fierce competition with Mimi from Digimon. She has a higher damage cap and damage multiplier, and also changes enemies' attribute to wood, so your damage won't be half against fire enemies. Not to mention that she has a way stronger leader skill, so if you care for wood teams, Tigrex is not a bad option now, but if we get Digimon, it will be power crap soon enough. Rathalos and Rathian is the patch unit you could purchase for $30, but isn't worth it since most of the forms have limited uses. The base form is a high damage dealer, but this unit doesn't offer much outside of that. Their active skill could be system with 2 units, but the resulting number of fire orbs on the board will be random, and if you run this unit as a leader, your damage output might be very low if you can't generate enough orbs for multiple TPA matches. Since they have a low cooldown active skill, you could swap them into a 7x6 board, which might help you ensure having more orbs to turn into fire orbs, but it's still very possible to end up without that many TPA matches, or even none if the enemy turns your board into a single attribute or heal orbs. It is unfortunate that the fire TPA playstyle got this leader with the highest effective HP at the moment, but fails to stand apart due to its unreliable active skill, and due to the lack of support. I guess there is some support down the line for this unit with Jogo and Choso from JJK, but I haven't stumbled upon any R&R teams using those JJK units. Honestly, I have barely seen any JP videos using R&R at all. His equips have a little more value. The first one is great on fire damage dealers and due to it having 5 effective skill boosts, and the second equip is one of the better Spark Break equips that also have damage and bulk awakening. Also, there really aren't that many Monster Hunter teams that would want you to have the Monster Hunter badge. I mentioned before that you could make some teams with up to 5 Monster Hunter units, but it seems like with some setup, you could just run the 15% team HP badge and not face that many issues. So I honestly don't see the point in exchanging for this badge unit, and it's obviously not worth the $30. Narwa and Ibushi is the new BGM unit, and it's a 3-to-1 cooldown cycling active skill system, meaning you can loop the effects with only 2 units. Well, you won't be able to loop the most important effect here, the 20 billion damage cap rate. It's not a bad active skill, but when compared to someone like Gino, one DDC'd NNI will deal about 65 billion damage over 4 turns, while Gino can deal up to 120 billion damage. don't get me wrong. NNI's damage output is still really high, but it seems that this unit didn't get much oxygen in JP, even though on paper, this unit is very strong. It's probably mainly due to the lack of light TPA support, having a low follow-up attack, and having a somewhat annoying requirement to have a 5 or more heal orb match. These units equipped have way more uses, as both can help turn units into cat type to get the HP buff in SN4. Skill boost, levitate, and a haste active skill are a rare and strong combination at the moment. The second equip doesn't have the same awakenings, but these are still great, and it also has an active skill that gives you a skill charge. This second equip is the one I see more widely used, mainly for SN4 parts farming with various teams. $30 would save you the trouble of chasing these two great equips in the REM, though if you have no interest in part farming or SN4, I would easily ignore this. Nergigante is one exchangeable 7-star that has an unconditional damage reduction leader skill. Even though 4 effective HP is very low for today's standard, you can still farm some dungeons like UN6 with this unit as a leader. One interesting thing about this leader skill is that you can survive hits after undead animation, since the leader skill's damage reduction is always active. Nergigante's active skill is also interesting, since it gives them a 7-turn cap break on a 3-turn cooldown. This more than looping effect doesn't matter much on this unit, but becomes very useful on a unit like Ghetto from JJK, who has a low cooldown active skill that pretty much allows you to use the units or assist active skill whenever you want to, without any downtime. Therefore, Nergigante's first equip is very commonly used on Ghetto. The second equip is a little less impressive, so outside of using the first one on Ghetto, Nergigante's equips don't exactly stand out. If you don't have a copy of this unit yet, I might consider exchanging for Nergigante if you have any interest in farming UN6, since that's where this unit sees more use as a leader, and there are also team comps for dungeons like old UN4 or SN1. Check the description below for some example teams. Fatalis is the key origin unit of choice for these Monster Hunter farming teams. As opposed to someone like Accelerator who needs you to move orbs to make a special shape, with Fatalis active skill, you can just swipe one orb, match 2 Ls, and hit 10C without making any extra matches. You would need leaders that give 8 bonus combos, and thankfully both Nergigante and Malzeno do just that. You want a minimum of 2 copies of this unit, and since the equips aren't that good, I think 2 copies is also the ideal number. Malzeno is the old Monster Hunter BGM unit and is a good leader for farming along with Fatalis and sometimes pairs with Nergigante. Their active skill might seem unnecessary since Fatalis takes care of orb generation, but this skill is useful to ensure a BDP whenever it's needed. Malzeno also takes care of solving board change issues, and their capri can be key if, for example, you want to one-shot the UN6 boss. The main appeal of this unit is their leader skill that can almost fully heal you under the right conditions, and a full HP heal is guaranteed if you lead with 2 Malzenos. So with this unit as a leader, you don't have to bother to match heal orbs or run an auto healer to farm some of these endgame dungeons. The effective HP is a bit on the low side since we are trending to 5 effective HP being the norm, but you can still effortlessly farm UN6 even when paired up with Nergigante, who has even less effective HP. You could drop Nergigante and run a Malzeno team to tackle SN2 and SN3, but you might struggle to meet HP requirements without this marble equipped, since this is the only one that has 2 team HPs and a levitate awakenings. NA has a few equips with 1 team HP and levitate, but some of the teams that I've linked below can't afford to lose a single team HP awakening. So in NA, we'll have to shuffle a few equips here and there, and thus our teams will be slower and maybe less consistent than the optimal JP teams. I would say that unless you want to farm SN2 and 3, you don't even need your own Malzeno, since the UN6 farming teams use Nergigante as the leader, and you could just find a friend that has a Malzeno up as helper. But if you do care about those dungeons, first check if you can even meet the HP thresholds for SN2 and 3 with your current monster box before even considering whether you should chase or buy Malzeno. Some of the SN2 and 3 teams include Bad Bat's Maru Goten, which will be exchangeable for 15 6-star and above Sanrio units. So you'll have to wait a little bit and maybe spend even more stones if you want to farm these SN dungeons with Malzeno. Their equips aren't particularly interesting, so I would feel comfortable with 0 copies if you only care about UN6 and have Nergigante or 1 copy of Malzeno to farm the new SN dungeons. And remember, as a starting point, you should at least have 2 copies of Fatalis to even run these teams. At 1% drop rate, it might be very tempting to skip the REM and get the Malzeno bundle. That way, you can completely skip this very lackluster REM. Of course, you might actually want to roll to stock up on Monster Hunter trade fodder, so you can get Namielle, who's another decent farming unit, but since you need 4 copies to make a system, you might have to roll a lot to be able to exchange for the optimal number of Namielles. These farming teams do not provide a lot of flexibility since 4 slots are dedicated to orb gen and to counter void damage and combo absorption shields. So on the 2 remaining slots, you'll have to fit in solutions to binds, damage absorption, and find a way of healing. Therefore, the main usage for Namielle is in dungeons without a lot of mechanics or disruptions. And it seems that this unit ceiling is Old UN2, which can already be easily farmed with various other leaders like Newer Norris or Gate, which were farmable or also exchangeable. Namielle will be able to easily farm the new upcoming Abyssal Seeker dungeon. And even though this dungeon is not that difficult, this dungeon employs the new part break mechanic, so Namielle has the upper hand if you want to increase your chances of obtaining the parts. But all of this doesn't exactly sell me on Namielle since the price is very high. I guess the main appeal of Namielle is their clearing speed since they can clear Old UN2 in almost 7 minutes. Namielle's first equip doesn't do much, and the second one is one of the best equips out there for Namielle themselves since it changes its lights up attribute to water and gives a huge damage boost in super gravity dungeons. Therefore, if you want to get a hold of this farming system, get ready to roll or exchange for at least 4 copies, because even if you think you only need 3 since you can pair with a friend, I think you'll want to have at least one of their best in slot equip. Overall, since I don't think Namielle opens up any new farming horizons and the exchanges are very expensive, I don't think the system is all that worth it for a lot of people. Ultimately, if I were to have a lot of fodder, I would just exchange for multiple Namielles, 2 Fatalis, and maybe an Nergigante, and try to avoid rolling in Monster Hunter, as most of the other units do not have that much value outside of maybe having one equip that is halfway decent. Maybe you already have a Misaka, a Celti and Accelerator, or maybe even a Newer Norris team that can clear the same content or probably even more than Namielle is able to. Sure, this new unit is much faster, but I don't consider this to be all that important and be worthy of all that fodder. If you disregard the other dungeon drops, if you already pulled the UN6 and the SN bosses from the REM, you might not even care about farming those dungeons with Malzeno, Fatalis, and Nergigante, and therefore you could skip these exchanges too. There are a few mid-rarities you might want to keep if you're exchanging for these units. For example, Kirin, who is good for farming the Monster Hunter Colosseum plus some easier dungeons like All Shura 1, Brachydios for his button equip, Gore, since they might be a decent cleric depending on the team, Tigrex, who's a decent wood ore generator at the moment, Orishi Kirin, as they could be a possible replacement for a Rimuru, and Lyacross and Seragios for their part break equips. Lyacross is also used in the optimal Old UN2 Namielle team, so do be careful not to exchange your only copies of Lyacross or Namielle if you care about that dungeon. The 2 new bundle units are a bit underwhelming, especially for their price. I could see the argument being made for Narwa and Ibushi since they could be decent leaders, but if we go by JP, they don't really have a bright future. Feline Kurotobi and Rathian are also exchangeable, but I don't think they're worth the fodder, especially if you plan to go for Namielle since these felines take 10 Monster Hunter units each. Overall, I don't see much value from rolling in this collab, and I would rather save for future events. The next collab should be Sanrio, which should follow very soon after Monster Hunter, then JJK, then Christmas, which we know nothing about, and then maybe Digimon. As to what synergizes with Monster Hunter units, Sanrio has Bad Bad Smaru, which you might want to exchange for if you went after Malzeno and Fatalis. JJK doesn't really use anything from Monster Hunter. There is some support for fire TPA units, but these didn't really stick around in JP. And Digimon at best uses some of the TPA and power break equips, but I don't think these are too important at the moment, unless you do care about power farming. Disney is coming back to JP in a few days, and while giving a cursory glance at the unit, I doubt Monster Hunter units will be that important. Maybe those previous TPA equips could come in handy in Genie Aladdin teams for parts farming, though it's very unlikely we'll see this collab in NA since it's Disney IP, but maybe the fact that there's an English version of the game that brought up on the rerun and that Gung-Ho is involved in said game increases the chances of an NA debut, right? So yeah, I would recommend saving your stones, but let me know your thoughts and your plans for the Monster Hunter collab. I plan to wait for all of the stamp rolls and do one multi to see if I get lucky with at least one Namielle. If I manage to get one, then I'll exchange for 3 more. Otherwise, I'll just forget about rolling. I'm doing a multi so I can get a chance at Feline Rathian, though I don't care too much about this unit since Geno teams can function without it. Even though I do have one Fatalis from the previous Monster Hunter run, I probably won't even exchange for a second one since I'm almost done farming SN2 and 3 with the Celti and Accelerator team, and don't really have any interest in farming more of those dungeons. So my plans after Monster Hunter are to mostly keep saving. At most, I'll do a multi in each event, but probably a bit more in JJK since I wanna get Suguna, and I'll mainly be hoping that Digimon comes to NA. I'll be planning to roll enough in Digimon to be able to get 3 copies of Omnimon, who is exchangeable for 14 Digimon units. So assuming I get unlucky, I want to be prepared to be able to do at least 42 rolls in that collab. I recently created a JP account, and thanks to Omnimon, I can clear pretty much all in-game content and have reached 1k rank already. I started this account while the 12 Magic Stone Super Gadfest was going on in JP, and speaking of which, that Super Gadfest has a lot more value than Monster Hunter, so maybe save for that too. But there's also the fact that it's almost NA's anniversary, so maybe we could get a better Super Gadfest as celebration. But let's be real, we're NA, so I don't think that's gonna happen. Alright, that does it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.